Hi, this is Ushio, and this is Roman's Christmas. This is a visual novel. I think it's kind of like a crime one. Let's check it out. Okay, sniffing about, loading up. The snow had stopped. A lonely lupine detective slowly pushed his way against the snow. It was a familiar pathway he followed, his footsteps heavy on the snow-buried stone pavement as he approached his destination. Day 1, 23rd December, 1283. It's 2 days until Christmas, and 2 days until the end of my fast. As nice as it is to feast on Christmas, I can't stomach a month-long fast. A whole month without any meat would certainly turn any wolf into a hare. Next time, I'm not fasting for a month just to solve a case. Lucky for me, I closed my last case before it ruined my vacation at the White Star Tavern. I'm not going to let another case interrupt my vacation. Not even a murder. I pulled my fur coat tighter and continued to walk against the cold wind toward the distant tavern. I finally saw the sign of the White Star just as the warm breath coming out of me began to freeze against my snout. I wonder why the tavern keeper won't move to a better spot. If it weren't for their excellent cider, a tavern this far from downtown wouldn't last a year. The door's hinges creaked open as I pushed it open. The warm scent of fireplace smoke, cooking bacon, and wheat bread encircled me. Several oil-painted portraits of white fur dragons decorated the walls, each one exquisitely painted. Haven't seen you for a while. What would you like to have today? Zazen was dusting one of his precious portraits when I entered the tavern. He paused just long enough to speak, and then continued his work. Why does an azure scale dragon like him love white fur dragons so much? Maybe I'll never know. Same as usual, please, but my fast doesn't break until the day after tomorrow. Got it. Zazen put down the duster, then wiped his hands with the cloth at the counter before grabbing a beer mug and making his way toward the cellar. I hung my coat on the hat stand and sat beside the fireplace to warm myself up. What a coincidence to meet you here. How about buying me a drink to celebrate the moment? Anzox must have heard me come in and rose up from the corner to approach me, bringing his lute with him. He's a bard, but one without a patron to support his artistic career. He's also something of a detective fanatic, though I doubt if he has the necessary talents to actually be one. Nowadays, he travels between taverns to sing for his supper, all while hoping to find some rich noble patron who'd appreciate his talents and shower him with wealth. Oh, that's a coincidence, right? I'm flattered that Roman, the great detective, still remembers me. I'd never forget the guy who can distract me every time when possible. Not on purpose, but it's still impressive. Of course I do. You left such an impression on me last time, when I was trying to solve that case, and you... Oh, I'm really sorry about that. I'm sorry. Anzox fled, clutching his lute. Great, saved a pint for myself. It's almost dinner time, but there's no other customers here. Is it because of the snow? I'm starting to feel thirsty after staying by the fireplace for too long. What's keeping Zazen from bringing out the booze? As I looked around, I spotted a guy covered in a priestly robe and veil, wearing a silver cross and curled up at a corner table. Oh, who's this? I can't make out his face in the candlelight. His mug of cider is still full and untouched. Who in the hell would? Is this a disguise? Hasn't he heard the saying about tigers changing their stripes? Zazen came out from behind the counter and handed me a mug of cider along with a note. That's elegant. If you find out anything regarding her, keep it to yourself. Her? Whatever. I've seen stranger things. I shoved the note up my sleeve, drank a gulp of cider, and purposely let out a loud belch. I relaxed in my usual chair, enjoying myself in the quiet and familiar atmosphere of the White Star Tavern. Looks like we're the only people here tonight. The logs in the fireplace were making tiny crackling sounds. Zazen sat behind the counter, reading the cookbook his father left him, and Zox was playing his lute. Elegant had gone upstairs a while ago. Maybe I'll live here after I retire, if I've got the money. Assuming the White Star keeps its comforting atmosphere until then. Come to think of it, what should I do to kill the time before dinner's served? I brought a book called The Brief History of Apollyon with me to do some reading during my vacation. Although I don't really think this book can tell me anything about my homeland that I don't already know. I could also check out White Star's special Christmas menu. I can't have any meat for another 2 days, but a glimpse of a good menu and a little bit of imagination won't break the rules. Maybe I'll just take a nap. I could use a good nap after losing sleep for almost a month. What should we do before dinner? Okay, so we seem to be in like this tavern, and we know the barkeeper and the guy in the corner, but there's a mystery person upstairs. But we don't know much about the world, I suppose, so I guess we need to learn. Might as well do some serious reading. This is our introductory episode, so we need to learn what this world is about. I took out the book A Brief History of Apollyon I borrowed from a crime scene from my bag. It's a cheap little book, printed with movable type, printing and distributed among the citizens of Apollyon. The king believes that if the citizenry know more about the country's history, they'll be more loyal. Thus he rewarded the minister who invented the printing technique and built 3 machines to print these things day and night. Although most of the books handed out in the slums end up being more useful for starting fires and as quality toilet paper. Still, it's better than nothing. Okay, let's read A Brief History of Apollyon. Dedicated to the great King Helios II, may God bless him and his subjects, and may the sun shine upon his glorious land forever. Apollyon, the country we live in, was established by the father of Helios II, Helios I the Pioneer. On the 4th of September 1169, a great earthquake endangered the reign of the ruling nobles. After the earthquake brought as God's punishment on the blasphemous nobility, God chose Helios I the Pioneer to execute his divine wrath. Helios I the Pioneer led his loyal soldiers of various species from Rinth, our glorious capital, and created the country of Apollyon that we know now. Helios I noticed the strife and discrimination caused by age-old hatreds between species. Thus he decreed that all species in Apollyon would be equal. On the 1st of September 1230, Helios II ascended to the throne after the first's demise. Okay, truly a blessed land of equality. Sarzan came out of the kitchen and brought me carrot stew and pale ale. Oh, thanks. You see, I don't really want to cook anything related to carrots, but given that you're fasting... Okay, what about fish though? It's not like I don't like your stew, but fish is way better. Unfortunately, my fishmonger fell in his fishing hole the other day. I'd love to serve you smoked herring. I can't stand carrot stew either, as a chef or a diner. Bon appetit. He returned to the kitchen and then brought Anzox a bowl of lamb stew. I'm jealous, I want that stew. Elegant came downstairs, hesitated a moment, and then took a seat at the corner table. She glanced at me, and I quickly looked elsewhere. Okay, and we have reached our introduction. So there are 4 characters, and we're kind of just hanging around in this tavern, in this bar, having our meal, minding our business, and having some drinks. Here we go. After dinner, I sank into a rocking chair near the fire and let myself relax. The logs in the fire, heavy with pine resin, crackled and popped as the chair slowly swung back and forth with a creaking noise. Not a whole lot of customers this month. Sarzan brought a chair and sat down next to me, gazing into the fireplace. Don't worry so much, dude. Just give it a couple of days and you'll have as many customers as you had in the years before. I get the feeling this year might be a little bit different. I can't really tell why though. Perhaps the howling winds outside are keeping the customers away. Anzox heard our conversation and came to join us with the loot, as if something as minor as high winds could stop folk from having cravings for Sarzan's famous home cooking. Okay, flatter me all you like, but you're still not getting a discount. I was being sincere, though I wouldn't mind a discount. The White Star has a variety of activities to entertain overnight guests and those who stick around after dinner. There's a darts competition on Saturday evenings. If all the players are friendly and there's no authorities around, Sarzan would cover some tables with blue flannel and take bets. I doubt anybody like that would be out in this weather though. I elbowed Sarzan quietly and gave him a wink. It's not tonight. He glanced toward Elegant before whispering to me with one hand hiding his mouth. After all, we don't know her that well. Let's hold off on the gambling for the time being. Well, if you think of something else, just let me know. I'll see if I can keep myself occupied. What do you want to do tonight? Okay, so... let's introduce ourselves. Elegant, how are you doing? By the way, I don't know Elegant very well. I'll ask her quietly when Anzox won't notice. Hello, hello. I walked toward the round table that she was sitting at before putting out a chair and taking a seat and offering my hand. Hey, I'm Roman, what's up? I waited for Elegant to reach out for a handshake, but it seems she didn't want to. My right hand hovered in the air as awkwardly as the silence. Hello. I apologise if I'm disturbing you. I was about to push my chair away and end the embarrassing conversation before it started, but paused as she motioned for me to stay seated. She looked me up and down slowly. I could almost feel the weight of those lake blue eyes through that thin veil. As a detective used to observing others, I know how uncomfortable it is to be examined so thoroughly by such a sharp and intense gaze. You're on good terms with the owner of the tavern, are you not? Well, you could say that, but how could you tell? The way you pass information's kinda too obvious. I felt naked. It was like her eyes were peering through me and into my soul. You need not fret. I do not care about your business. I would imagine a detective like you has more than a few informants. I didn't notice until now that I was involuntarily biting my left thumb. It's a nervous tic I've had since I was young. I still haven't managed to break the habit. No need to be polite. Just tell me why you came to me. Well, if you insist. Relieved, I unclenched my fist and took out my handkerchief to wipe the sweat from my pads. Actually, I came to ask your race, your cider, or your gender. Let's talk about, the cider? Not interested in actually drinking from your glass, no. I prefer to remain sober in case something unexpected happens. At this moment, Anzoc suddenly came up. Oh, there he is. Still deep in conversation, are we? I thought you were talking about nothing, so I thought I'd join in. Trust me, we've got plenty to talk about. By the way, I've heard a puzzle in a tavern from another town. Would you be interested? Sorry, we're kind of in the middle of something. Okay, what's the puzzle? Oh, okay. Elegant seemed interested, taking her mug and sitting down with Anzox by the fire. Playing a puzzle game again? Sarzan just finished cleaning the kitchen and came to sit by the fire. Yeah, you came just in time. Okay, I'm not in the mood for this. Hear a story or go to rest. Okay, let's stay here. Let's listen to the stories. It's not like you've got anything better to do. You can just listen and let us solve the puzzle if you want. I'd better do it by myself than leaving it to you guys. Okay, let's start. Anzox cleared his throat, then caressed his lute and said, One night, in a small farming town famous for its barley, the only windmill in the town came to a stop. This was the first time it had happened. Since the mill was so vital to their work, the villagers rushed out to check the mill. From afar, the villagers saw the windmill blades were no longer rotating. They thought that the sudden wind and snow had broken the transmission shaft that ran the mill. The villagers came to the mill, the ground covered in thick snow over their ankles. The dark wooden bill towered over them in the white expanse, the blades turned in an ominous position, looking like an inverted cross. I assume this is a puzzle, not some bard tale used to coax coins from drunkards. Elegant's tail swished as she impatiently drummed her fingers on the tabletop, while Sarzan sat and listened attentively. It's not as though you're paying me, so shut up and listen. Okay, I will continue. As they drew closer, they found the windmill's maintenance gondola was tied with a hemp rope to secure it. Okay, please click the clue button to view specific evidence. Where's that? Clue down here. Okay, safety rope, ordinary rope, tying the miller on the maintenance basket. Okay, let's keep going. But then they saw it. The miller who ran the mill was suspended upside down in the middle of the air. His eyes were wide open with fear, his face contorted as though he was screaming in terror. His paws were stiff and hanging down and level with the edge of the windmill blades. The snow from yesterday clung to his cold body. How ironic that the object used to ensure safety had become a lethal weapon. No one could have imagined it. Lethal? Wait a minute, Anzox. Did the safety rope really cause the death of the miller? Do you disagree, Roman? After all, the safety rope was tied to the miller's dead body. Yeah, but why can't the safety rope be the murder weapon? Was it tied to his ankles? Let's have another look. So, okay, wait. So we got our main cast. We got Roman. This is us. We're a grey wolf, 32 years old, detective. Sarzan, Anzox, Elegant, and the miller. The body was found hanging from windmill. Okay, so look at the clues again. Hanging upside down, his hands level with the windmill blade. So he was tied by his feet, and that wouldn't kill him. So, yeah, it can't be deadly if it's tied to his ankles. Is it like that sport from overseas? What do they call it? Bungee jumping? Correct. A safety rope is typically tied to the ankle or waist. Considering the position of the body, the only possible way was tied to the ankles. That's true, but there must be something that killed the miller. We can discuss that next. Please continue your story. As I was saying, the miller had died in the windmill, where he had spent his nights and days. The local police initially determined that the old miller was trying to repair the windmill while he was drunk. He had slipped, lost his footing, and fell from the repair gondola. However, the cause of death was still unclear, though his head might have struck the windmill. The townsfolk invited one of the greatest detectives in the realm to investigate the scene. He was an old-fashioned detective, and refused until he was paid no less than 13 reya and all travel expenses. Wow, that's 910 sate. For just one case, that detective could eat fried lamb chops every meal for a month, if he hadn't vowed to fast until Christmas. Okay, I wish my cases paid that well, dude. Oh, do they not? I thought you were worth the price. Anzoc started to laugh, but stopped when I was glaring at him. When the townsfolk came to his humble residence, he was seated behind his great desk, playing with the prism he had bought from the capital's Grand Bazaar. Sunlight from the small window passed through the lens and scattered into a rainbow of colour. After listening to the villager's account, the detective struggled to get up from his easy chair with the cane, then asked his only servant to call the carriage. This would be one of his few field investigations. One problem was that the description of the crime scene is not detailed enough to his liking. Another problem was that the case sounded so bizarre. And the biggest problem was that the glib bard could not get to the point. Then why don't you tell the story? The sudden interruption made Anzox blush with anger. It's fine, the details make the story more vivid, even if they're irrelevant. The day after the body was discovered, the detective arrived at the town in the afternoon. He learned from the gossip in the tavern that on the night of the miller's death, 2 people had spent the night in the mill, and they both had alibis. Okay, who are they? One's the miller's daughter, and the other's the miller's apprentice. They'd spent the night in the mill as usual. Okay, about those, I'd like to know. Okay, so let's have a look at some of this information now. So we got the corpse position upside down. So our first deduction, the miller was killed after he returned home. Every person in town has an alibi. Body has no wounds. Might have slipped and fell and hit his head. Okay, characters. We got Hans, the miller's apprentice. An 18-year-old cat came from a nearby town 8 years ago, gained miller's favour due to his diligence. And Eleanor, the daughter. Let's ask about the daughter. Tell me. Eleanor, the miller's daughter, 16 years old and a grey wolf. She had no shortage of suitors in the town, and even caught the eye of a few local nobles. And not just because of her father's wealth, she was also renowned for her beauty. She had been the dream girl for every bachelor in town since she was 14. She had a good relationship with her father, or at least other outsiders thought so. Okay, so tell us about the apprentice. Tell us. The apprentice's name was Hans. He came to the mill from the next town 8 years ago. At the time he was just 10 years old and all alone in the world. No parent could be so cruel if it weren't for the money. Fortunately, the miller treated him well. The apprentice was also very clever. He always seemed to be able to succeed, no matter how complicated the miller's orders. Recently, there was a rumour that he had a close relationship with the daughter. Okay, so let's have a look. Is there a relationship going on? So would that mean that the miller wouldn't have liked that? Let's continue. I have to say, those two have caught my interest. Please go on. What about the miller's reputation? The miller had lived his entire life in the town and had no enemies. He was well regarded by the townsfolk. His wife died of puerperal fever shortly after she gave birth to Eleanor, and he had lived as an old bachelor ever since. He had several drinking friends, who he'd meet with the pub almost every night after supper, drinking and talking until the tavern closed. It sounds like some of the tavern's regulars. Some folks at the tavern provided the detective with additional information. The miller had been extremely generous recently, and one day he even brought everyone in the tavern a round of ale in celebration. That's all the information on those present. Having gotten his fill of gossip from the noisy drinkers in the tavern, the detective left the tavern and went walking toward the mill. Within 10 minutes, the detective arrived at the mill. It was a clear and windless morning. The snow at the gate of the mill hadn't been swept away by the overzealous villagers. The detective, relieved and cautious, checked the snow from the outside. Okay, the snow was unexpectedly clean. Apart from the footprints left by the villagers who found the corpse in the outer circle, and the footprints that went all the way to the front of the house, there was nothing except some messy traces in front of the last footprints. It seemed that there was no shortcut or alternate entrance. The detective put on his hat and came to the mill door. He glanced down by accident before entering. There seems to be a circular imprint found around the footprints in front of the door, and a stone used to hold the door open that had also been moved. Stepping inside, the detective met Eleanor, who was covering her face and crying, and Hans, who was comforting her. The body of the old miller was still hanging from the windmill, swinging like a pendulum in the wind. Okay, do you want to listen to their testimony first, or go straight to the scene? What should we do? Let's listen to the testimony. Yeah, do that. Perhaps you should investigate the scene first, in case something gets destroyed later. Not to mention, the witness does not seem to be emotionally stable. Okay. Let's listen to her, even though she is The glare coming through Elegant's veil should have set Anzox on fire, so he shut his mouth tactfully. Oh, is there a thing about certain species in this world? We don't quite know. The detective first went up the stairs to check the scene of death. Anzox quickly sketched something on a piece of paper and handed it over. That's a nice sketch. The mill is divided into 3 floors and is about as tall as 5 people. Between the maintenance gondola and the 3rd floor and the window on the 2nd floor is the connecting shaft between the fan blade and the mill. The maintenance gondola is extremely narrow and long and about as wide as an adult's foot. There was a layer of snow on it but no footprints. 2 ropes were tied at the railing of the basket. The left part was covered with snow like the other parts of the railing, and there was no snow on the right part. The detective leaned against the railing and looked down. Under the wooden railing hung the cold body of the miller. The rope on the left has only a section of rope head, swaying in the wind like a peddler who dared not go home without a sail. As he tried to lean out further, the railing creaked under the pressure. The snow fell from the inclining railing, falling and disintegrated in the air. The detective's biological instincts kicked in, his fur bristling involuntarily. He pulled back quickly and turned to check the situation at the entrance, putting his right hand inside his coat and grasping the dagger he kept to defend himself from villains. It was a gift from his first love. Every time he held the dagger, it reminded the temperature of a palm on that fateful day. Okay, are we listening to a love story or something? Please, one elegant is enough. The detective turned around and found nothing behind him. He went downstairs quietly and found that the 2 of them were as they were, as if they'd not moved. He went back to the 2nd floor and looked up from the window. Above his head was the rotating shaft of the windmill blade, which gleamed back from grease from the daily rotation and maintenance. The shadow cast by the rotating axis hit the detective's face, which gave him a very uncomfortable feeling, as though he was some kind of prehistoric hunter shuddering in terror at the sight of some giant beast. The gears of the windmill were exposed, about 30 centimetres from the upper eaves of the window. The triangular teeth were distributed around the rotating shaft. The detective put his hand into his coat pocket and gently ran his thumb across the edge of the prism he carried. Something came to mind. The detective looked out of the window again. The lowest gear groove seemed to be more worn than the others. He went back to the 1st floor, passing by the living room and straight into the kitchen. The oven seemed to have been used recently, and the kitchen filled with a mixture of the pungent smell of charcoal and the delicious grain smell of barley bread. He opened the oven and flicked the ashes with a stick. The shape of a piece of charcoal under the ashes reminded him of the prism in his pocket, like a wedge. Having gathered necessary evidence, the detective returned to the living room to question the witnesses. Noticing the detective's approach, Eleanor sat upright with hands support, her eyes drooping. She was dressed in a light blue nightdress. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her facial fur was combed, and it was easy to see the state of disorder despite her attempts to cover it. Anzox coughed a few times, and when he spoke again, it was in a higher, feminine voice, which I am not doing. "Welcome, Mr. Detective. I assume this visit is related to my father's death. It'd be nice if you could talk this way more often. Wow, it's really hard to speak like this. Don't push it. Come on, show us your dedication to your craft." It took the detective about 10 minutes to persuade the apprentice to go upstairs with the servant, lest one of their testimonies influence the other. After formally introducing himself and some brief preparation, the detective asked her to tell the story of that night. "Okay, here come that testimony. Yesterday after dinner, my father went to the tavern as usual. I finished my housework after about 8 o'clock. It was about 2 hours before my father came back. Nothing seemed strange. I then went up to Hans's room to chat with him. 2 hours passed by, and we didn't realise that my father had yet to return as normal. It wasn't until around 11 o'clock that we realised how late it really was. I hurried downstairs, thinking my father was quietly sitting in the living room, ready to scold me. But he wasn't there. The door was closed, and no one was in the living room. I had a feeling that something terrible must have happened. It was like a snake had slithered under the door and crawled up my spine to whisper in my ear. I don't know if it's because of the wind or the old hinges, but the door on the day was more difficult to open than usual. I pushed the door open and the wind blew the snow into the house. I propped the door open and made my way outside. When I got under the windmill, I had a strange thought, like an itch on my back that couldn't be scratched, and I couldn't help but look up. Hanging above my head was a purple face that was swollen and swaying in the wind. His eyes were as prominent as goldfishes. Saliva had flowed down his open, screaming mouth and frozen into ice on his snout and fur. I was frightened, so I rushed back into the house and closed the door. I couldn't sleep afterwards. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still see that face. I can't believe that that was my father." As she finished her description of the horrible situation, Eleanor collapsed on the sofa with her hands covering her face. At the time, the detective smelled something fishy in her testimony. After thorough thought of her testimony, the detective found the irreconcilable contradiction between the testimony and the evidence. Which evidence contradicts Eleanor's testimony? I had 2 issues with that. One was the timings. Because didn't it say like 8 o'clock? Let's look at the log so you can kind of go back and have a look. So it said it's 8 o'clock, right? I finished my housework at 8 o'clock. It was 2 hours before my father came back. That makes it 10 o'clock, yeah? And then went to Hans's room, another 2 hours. That would make it midnight, right? And it wasn't around until 11 o'clock that we realised how late it really was. So there's an hour missing there, right? And the other thing I didn't like the look of, his saliva had flowed down his open, screaming mouth and frozen into ice on his snout and fur. Does that mean, what way has the saliva flowed? Downwards? Which means he wasn't tied by his ankles originally. So it's a bit vague. And she didn't recognise that it was her father, which is even weirder. Okay, so let's... Have we got like multiple chances, or what should we do? Oh wow, there's loads. I'm not sure. I'm going to go with the corpse position. We'll try this one. It's the position of the body. She couldn't have seen if the head of the body is upside down, right? Eleanor was on the first floor and the body was above her, head down. What else could she see but the head? Oh, sorry. Which evidence contradicts Ella's testimony? Oh, we got to keep picking. So, wasn't the rope? So let's have a look again. The miller went to the pub after dinner. Ella went to Hans's room to chat from 8 to 11. When she went out, she saw the dead miller. She was so frightened, she shut the door. She didn't even inspect or, like, raise an alarm. It is weird. Let's try the first deduction. The miller was killed soon after he returned home. But according to this, he was killed at about 11 o'clock. So, I don't know, try that. It's contradictory. Why? Well, anyway, I think it is. Then perhaps you should find a more suitable job. I am not getting these right. There were footprints in the outer ring of snow, one of which reached the door. Try that. Footprints. Oh yeah, tell me about the footprints. The paradox is there's no other footprints on the scene, or Eleanor will destroy footprints. Yeah, if she went out to look, where would her footprints be? If Eleanor had gone out, she would have certainly stepped on the miller's footprints, but we established the only footprints on the scene were the ones that go straight to the gate of the mill, and there are no other footprints like them. But in other words, Eleanor didn't go out at all. Yeah, but we don't know the motive until the next inquiry. After all, contradictions can't be based on conjecture. The detective tidied his sleeves and carefully pointed out the errors in Eleanor's testimony. As I recall, Miss Eleanor, you said you just went out to check outside. Yeah. Then why is there only one set of footprints from the outside of the house to the gate of the mill? Well, I must have been so scared that my memory's confused. Okay, let me start over. Okay, another testimony. Yesterday after dinner, my father went to the tavern as usual. I went upstairs for Hans to chat. Sure, to chat. 2 hours passed by, and there was no sign of my father's return. I went downstairs around 11 and found he'd not come back. I opened the door to my father's distorted head, appearing as the body swung outside. I was so scared, I ran back to the house and closed the door. The scene was so frightening that my memory was confused. That night, every time I closed my eyes, that horrible face would pop up. I couldn't sleep at all. As long as a lie is told, more lies are bound to be used to cover it up. It's a pity that even the most talented folk can't make up every lie perfectly, let alone under such pressure. Miss Eleanor, there's really no need to hide anything from me. Even the detective saw through the lies that she made up this time, which evidence contradicts Eleanor's testimony. I mean, if it's so obvious, why can't I figure it out? There were circular imprints around the last footprint in front of the door, so didn't she say that she ran straight back in? She comes straight back inside, right? So why would there be circular imprints? I don't know. I think the circular imprint is suspicious. You might be right, but it seems that it has nothing to do with Eleanor's testimony at present. Then we should keep in mind it in the next investigation then. Okay, let's keep going. That's close, but not quite. Also, it's slightly higher than the doorway, so it shouldn't have lined up, right? The structure of the bill contradicts the testimony. In what way? The rotor of the windmill is between the second floor window and the third floor. The length of the fan blade should not reach the door. You're close. Oh, we're close. His hands are level with the windmill blades. His position of the body. Did you not guess that before? This time it's different. How could Eleanor see his head in the door if the miller's paws were even with the windmill's blades? Eleanor saw what she should not have seen, only because she was actually out there and cleaned up her footprints when she came back. Not to mention cleaning up her footprints is suspicious. Why would you need to clean your footprints if you're just a witness? Perhaps she panicked and did something that would implicate herself accidentally, or the whole scene she described is some sort of delusion. Which could be true. Fortunately, it's only a puzzle. If this were a real case, it could never be solved. I'm confused. How long would it take for you to figure it out? If you cannot get your ideas into shape, then you should probably stay quiet. Rude. As you said, you saw the face of the deceased in the door. This is definitely impossible for you with the current position of the body. Corpses don't simply move after death, do they? So how? I don't know. Eleanor screamed hysterically and ran out of the living room. It seemed he couldn't get near her for a while. So the detective went upstairs to visit the other witness, Hans. The detective saw Hans upstairs. He was wearing a soft hat, a burlap jacket, and brown linen trousers. The dark grey eyes under the brim made the detective uncomfortable for some reason. That kind of look reminded him of a colleague he met in another case several years before, a wolf with beautiful blue eyes that had an unruly and wild gaze. Don't push it. Calm down, man. As I started to get up, I was pressed back into my seat by Sarzan's thick claws. He's still so sensitive about conflict between customers. 5 years ago, someone made the mistake of starting a fight in the tavern. He grabbed the guy with only one paw and threw him across the street. Somehow, this attracted more customers. I still don't know what they're thinking. Are they masochists? And the detective noticed that the hair on the paws seemed to be darker than elsewhere. The detective's face remained unchanged. He lowered his hat to cover his spying eyes. Mr. Hans, I hope you don't mind. I'm just doing my job. The detective sat in the wooden chair opposite of Hans and handed his cane to the servant beside him. I would like to hear about what happened last night. So straightforward, Mr. Detective. Well, I'm going to try my best. Okay, another testimony. This is Hans's testimony. Yesterday after dinner, like every ordinary night, the miller went to the pub to pass the time. Eleanor and I stayed in the mill to watch the house. We stayed in the room until 11 o'clock and found out that the miller didn't come back at his usual time. Eleanor went downstairs to check while I hurried back to my room. It wasn't long before I heard Eleanor screaming downstairs and the sound of the door being slammed. I went downstairs and saw Eleanor pale and slumped on the ground. I took her back to the room and she told me off and on about what she saw outside the door. I stayed at her bedside all night to keep her company. Okay, one question. What is suspicious, the alibi, the room, no moving, or the bang? What is the bang? Could Eleanor really be capable of slamming the door so hard? Even the weakest woman can produce explosive strength when under the influence of extreme emotions. Like the last time you requested a fighting guest get out the pub. Oh, that was me being calm, but you're welcome to try me if you don't believe me. Okay, I'm a bit out of practice, but it wouldn't be difficult to throw both of you with one hand and Anzox with the other. What did I do wrong? Okay, so this guy is Sarzan's super strong. Okay, so what is suspicious? The alibi, the room, or no moving around? What about the room? Their testimony is contradictory about their room. Obviously the wording seems to be a little subtle. What about it? Different rooms. Eleanor said she went to Hans's room to chat with him, but Hans's testimony just now seems to mention that he went back to my room. It might not be the same room. It seems like one of them forgot the prepared testimony in haste. Mr. Hans, I have a small question. It has nothing to do with the case, and more with me being a jealous old soul faced with two young lovers. In which room do you usually date in? Well, in Eleanor's room. If that were the case, then Eleanor's testimony contradicts yours. She told me that the two of you were in your room as usual. Oh really? She might be confused by the shock? Or she was so frightened that she forgot the alibi you agreed on in advance? What are you talking about? I don't know. Hans kept fiddling with his hands, and the fine beads of sweat moistened the short hairs on his forehead. His grey eyes avoided the detective's gaze. Oh, please excuse me, Mr. Hans. It's just my speculation after all. Okay, but I wouldn't choose a partner who gets nervous so easily if I were you. Oh, your hands shake when you're nervous. Can you even grasp the rope with those? The detective could read Hans's tense behaviour like a book, and now he needed only a little physical evidence to prove his conjecture. The detective went out to the snowfield where the body had been lowered from the windmill by the servant. The miller's body was spread out in the snow so that everybody could see it. As the detective inspected the now neatly arranged corpse, he couldn't help but grimace. After reprimanding the servant who had carelessly moved the body, he went to investigate it. Okay, let's search the scene. Please click the place you want to investigate on the picture to collect evidence. Okay, so this is our victim. So they've been upside down, hung by the ankles, right? So let's check the feet. The rope, yeah. The miller's ankle was tied with a safety rope, cheap but reliable. The knot was a hangman's noose. And now he plans to sell us rope. I'm not a merchant. Okay. The hands? Anything in the hand? The detective looked at the curled up fingers and found grey fur inside his nails, which matched his own fur colour. Okay, is that same for both hands? Why is his shirt pulled up? What's going on with the chest? He put on his gloves, pulled aside the miller's coat, and revealed his thick fur. He could feel the liquefying fat under the miller's skin. The miller looked quite plump, thanks to his wealthy life. Is this even related to the case? Don't add so many pointless details to the case. Who knows, maybe it's relevant somehow. He found grey hairs under the miller's nails that matched the miller's own fur colour, and the skin is scratched. Okay, anything else? What's down here? The detective looked down at the miller's third leg. Why are you looking there? The townspeople all looked confused while the detective examined it inch by inch. Yeah, don't look at that if it's not. No, it's gross. Stop there. Okay. I actually got an achievement for that. Thank you, Steam. In his pockets? Search his pockets. Didn't he have, like, saliva or something that was, like, freezing on his skin or something? The detective looked closely at the face. He was scared by the dead miller's twisted face, even though it wasn't his first time seeing a body. The miller's wide-open eyes were glowing proudly and lifeless. His wrinkles were getting clearer due to his stiff facial muscles. His mouth stayed shut, but silent fear still escaped from it. He'd been greatly frightened. The miller's fur remained fluffy, with no signs of strangle marks. He got up and finished his search. Now he knew what had happened. Okay, and now let's put the pieces back together. Wait, there's still loads of questions to be solved. Did you take notes for the evidence? Let's take a look. Okay, it seems the main problems with the case lie with the cause of the miller's death, the weapon that killed him, whether he was murdered, and the killer's motive. The process of how the case happened is also noteworthy. If it's impossible to confirm the sequence of events, we should focus on the factors that change with time, such as the weather. Let's have a quick Q&A then. Please click the mobile icon to answer questions. What is this? So, I'll just click on here. Okay, so what's the weapon? What's your opinion on the murder weapon? It's either the twine, I think the stone? Shall we say stone? The stone against the door. It had been moved. It could also be moved when opening the door. Okay, you're right. Besides, where's the trauma on the body? There should be at least one weapon. So, okay, let's go with the... what, shock? What, he died from exposure or something? Or the rope? Let's go with the rope. It was tied to his ankle, remember? Okay, shock. Maybe it was an invisible weapon. Interesting. How about murdering him with the shock which was caused by the sudden drop? Not everyone would be so easily scared as you are, but anyone would be shocked if they were hung upside down without any preparation, let alone a drunk, overweight miller. Indeed, I suppose a sudden death could be possible because of those external factors. It seems like this time the detail wasn't just to add dramatic flair. Of course, every detail is necessary. So why did you take nearly half an hour to describe the suspect's quiet? Okay, so that's the weapon. How about the method? What's the process of the crime? Arrange the occurrences chronologically from top to bottom by dragging chips into position. Okay, oh wow, we've got to work this out. So I think that they left like a noose on the floor. He stepped into it and there was then kind of caught like a trap. So there are only 5 things here. So we need to eliminate 2 clues. So I don't think number 3 is correct because it wasn't around his neck. The suspect dropped the rope from the maintenance basket. The suspect ran away after committing the crime. The rope hitched to the killer's ankle. The suspect burnt down the wooden wedge. The suspect lifted the miller into the air. The rope left a circular mark on the ground. The suspect dropped the maintenance rope from the basket. Oh, how about that? Yeah. The suspect dropped the rope from the maintenance basket. The rope left a mark on the ground. Something like this. The rope hitched the miller's ankle, and the suspect ran away after committing the crime. Something like that. Right now, there are 2 chips in position. It will help a lot if you arrange the events in chronological order. You can manage your thoughts about the case much easier this way. Sort the 5 chips from top to bottom, then place your bet without hesitation. Easy peasy. Okay, so if 2 are in position, I think 6 and 5 are in the right position. So we just go like this. The rope left the mark on the ground. Let's try that. 0 chips in position. Okay. No, it wasn't the suspect who lifted him, was it? It was because they'd snagged up the mill. So maybe it's something like that? 3 chips in positions. No. That's not right. So that has to be back to that. So maybe number 5 is wrong? I don't know. Seems right, we'll go with that. Luck may have been a component, but it's not impossible. Okay, so let's try our motive. Let's talk about the motive. First of all, we have already established that the miller got along well with the villagers. So what could the motive for the murder be? What is the possible motive? Personal grudge, money relations, family conflict, or the daughter's relationship? Maybe if he didn't approve of his daughter being with his apprentice? The miller wouldn't allow the relationship. Yeah. You mean someone murdered him so the pair could be together? It's unnecessary to kill him just because of a disagreement though. Which means something recently happened to provoke the culprit into killing the miller quickly. Then the identity of the criminal is obvious. Even so, there's no need to kill him. Okay, who's the suspect then? Who's the culprit? I think it's obvious the criminal is... Is it both of them? Did they work together? Yeah, we'll go with both. Yeah, they share the common benefit and the operation of the trap needs cooperation. We are done. Then the whole picture of this case is crystal clear. How come you're so excited since you aren't the one who solved the puzzle? I'm just excited to see you work, okay? So the whole story of the case is... Here we go, case playback. The miller was a nice guy, but he was particularly picky about his daughter's relationships, especially her relationship with his apprentice. But even he couldn't stop their love from blossoming. The two young people seized every moment they got to be together. And this situation had been going on for a while. As eager as they were to be open with their relationship, they couldn't bear the miller's denial of their love any longer. All of a sudden, the miller made an important decision, which is... Okay, so the miller agreed to their marriage. No, he did not. The miller betrothed his daughter. The miller had picked out a satisfactory candidate among his daughter's suitors and announced his decision to her. The miller thought he had arranged a good marriage. Naturally, his special generosity made his acquaintances at the tavern extremely enthusiastic. Which is why they decided to kill the miller that night. The lovers were supposed to escape that night after they finished the deed, but the heavy snow and another accident forced them to change the plan. After the miller went out, Hans tied the noose with a safety rope and lowered it down from the third-floor maintenance gondola. By the way, the noose is the method used to hang murderers. Their original plan might have been for Eleanor to meet the miller on the first floor, put a knot hanging around from the windmill around his neck. Then Eleanor send a signal to Hans and let him pull the rope up to hang the miller. But even the calmest people might make a costly mistake when they kill for the first time. At about 10 o'clock, Hans, whose hand shook when he got nervous, lost his grip on the rope and dropped the knot in the snow, leaving the circular imprint. Eleanor, who had just opened the door, was ready to greet her father, saw the noose fall to the ground. She probably wanted to warn Hans to take it back, but the miller was already close by then. It would attract the miller's attention if the rope was pulled back up. The murder attempt should be failed by that point, but by sheer coincidence, the miller took a wrong step that changed the whole thing. He stepped in it. So, just by accident? Or Eleanor did it? No, it was an accident, I think so. He stepped in the noose by accident, it was a complete fluke. At the time, Hans had just grasped the rope outside the maintenance gondola. When the miller's paw moved forward in the snow, the rope was pulled. Hans felt the pull and instinctively pulled up the rope according to the original plan, putting the miller up by his ankle. The miller fell on the snow before he was pulled up into the air, leaving the messy marks in front of his footprints as he struggled. Hans hung the miller in the air, dared not to let go of the rope, and let him struggle in the air. After a while of struggling and cursing, the face of the miller changed from red to purple. And as more and more blood rushed to his head, his movements became weaker and weaker until they stopped. Ella and Hans wanted to escape after this comedy of success, but finally decided to disguise the scene as if the miller had accidentally died and planned their testimonies. After all, as long as they could get rid of the suspicion of murder, they could inherit the mill. The reward for taking such a risk was extremely good. Hans tied the safety rope to the maintenance gondola, pretending that the miller had tied the rope himself. However, it had snowed by that time. The rope tied to the fence pushed the snow off, therefore there was no snow on the right side. He also stuck a wooden wedge in the windmill gear and made the windmill stop spinning. As the distant villagers saw the windmill had stopped, they would naturally think that the miller accidentally fell and died while repairing the windmill. The morning the detective arrived was sunny and windless. The windmill wouldn't spin, even without the wooden wedge stuck in. This was his chance to throw the wedge into the bread stove and destroy the evidence. Then all he needed to do was get back to the room and wait until dawn. If you look closely at the scene, you would think that the miller died by accident. Although it looks intriguing at first, it's actually a novice puzzle with many loopholes, even though I got stuck a lot of the time. Next time, I'll give the legendary Detective Roman a much more difficult puzzle. After the long investigation, the detective told everyone his inferences in the tavern and left the final decision to the villagers. The snow had stopped, and the detective opened the door of the snow-covered tavern. Thick snow still covered the paved road, and the detective set foot on the road home. It's late. Looks like there won't be any more customers tonight, so I'm going to close up for the night. If you need anything, please come to the 3rd floor to find me. Sarzan gave me and Elegant the room keys, closed the tavern, and went upstairs. Then perhaps it's time for me to go upstairs too. I dare not risk being locked out by Sarzan if it's too late. There are 3 beds in the attic. Sarzan usually has 2 beds for himself, so he can have enough space to stretch his limbs out. The 3rd bed is usually rented at a low price to acquaintances who need accommodation on a tight budget, such as Anzac's. Elegant and I sat at the same round table, staring at each other silently. Is there anything else to do tonight? I don't think so. We shall go back to our room. I was planning just to relax, but I didn't expect to spend the whole evening solving a mystery. I've got a headache now. I want to go back to my room and rest. I finished the rest of my beer. Oh, great detective. You really can drink a lot. It's not like I'm down in liquor. It doesn't matter if I have a cup or two. I pointed to the cider that she'd only had a sip of in front of her. So, are your usual methods just like that drunken style? I'm on vacation. I'm allowed to be off my game. Angry, I leaned in close and said in a low voice, What's more, your nun costume looks out of place in the tavern, and you didn't even touch your cider. If you plan to stay here, I'm afraid you'll probably scare away the target of your investigation. Oh. I see. An amateur mistake on my part. Elegant hesitated for a while, and then turned to look at me. Thanks for reminding me. Oh, you're welcome. So it turned out that you really are investigating something here. I guess I'm right. So, you're not entirely wrong, but now it's too late to change my clothes. I have to think about how to play this afterwards. Elegant, who had been confident until now, seemed to have become nervous as she gazed at the reflection in her mug. When you have a moment, I'd like to find some time to hear what you're actually doing here. It's late. I'm going to bed now, though. Good night. I said goodbye to Elegant and went upstairs to my room. My room was the first one on the right. Unsurprisingly, Sarzan had already cleaned the guest rooms impeccably. Maybe I was too drunk. I kicked off my boots and flopped onto the bed, almost dreaming when I touched the pillow. Alright, and I think that will probably do a nice, long, extended episode for our introduction to Roman's Christmas. But this is Usho signing off, and hopefully I'll see you next time as we keep going.